Okay, so we now know how to find the product and the sum. Okay, so what I want to do now in this video is to look at how to find the maximum in an array, the maximum value, and the minimum value. So let's start off with the maximum. Again, notice we follow the same steps. We need to get the inputs into the array. However, the key part when it comes to max is that we need to loop through again. However, we need to always keep track of the larger number. So how do we do that? It's quite straightforward. We need to create a new variable, and that variable will contain the largest so far encountered number. If we encounter another number that is larger than the one we previously looked at, then we simply switch them, whereby the newly encountered biggest number becomes the biggest. That might sound confusing, so let's just go ahead and do it. All right, so let me open up my Visual Studio Code, and if you remember, this is the same code we looked at where we asked for inputs. However, I will make a change to it. I want 5 inputs, and instead of changing this to 5, I will just say const, remember that, int size, and we'll set it to 5. So that way I'm gonna put size here, okay, and then I don't need to put 3 anymore. I can also put size. All right, so that's much better. So if I decide to change from 5 to something else, all I need to do is to make a change right here, and I'm done. Okay, so I don't want ints though. Let me change this to doubles. Okay. All right, so we are set. Step 1, declare the array. Let me remove that comment. Step 2, we tell the user what we want them to do. Okay, so please enter let me put size here. Okay, so please enter my quotes. All right, so I need to close that right here. All right, much better. Okay, so now I don't need to put a specific number. So in this instance, it's gonna say please enter 5 numbers below. All right, so let's get rid of this comment. Okay, so we look like we are ready. Let's just test it out. We made changes, so whenever we make changes, we want to test out our code. So let me recompile. Okay, all right, please enter 5 numbers below. Remember, we're just testing. Okay, so it still works. Great. So now let's go ahead and let's compute. So find the largest number, okay, or not the largest value. All right, so remember, our program will execute line by line. So by the time we get here, all this code would have already been run, which means that we expect that there is an array, and that array would have contained 5 values that the user has entered. So now when I get here, I am using that assumption that there is an array. So the first thing I need to do, I need to create a variable, okay, and I'm going to call it max, okay. And here's the important part. I'm going to set it to be the first item in the array, numbers 0, okay. So I'm going to say that max, the first item, is the biggest, okay. That's just what I need to do. That's the first step. Now the second step is to iterate over the array, okay. Iterate over the rest of the array, okay. So let's do that. So I'm going to use a for loop, okay, and for now I'm going to put I 0, and of course I'm going to say while I less than size for now, and then I plus plus. All right, okay. Now what I want to do, okay, and to make it clear what I'm trying to accomplish, I'm going to make a sample array which I will say has 11.2, maybe 100, 23, so 1, 2, 3, 12.25, and maybe 0.5, okay. So this is my sample array. So what did I do in this first step? Okay, or in fact, let me put this at the top. Cut this, put that right here. Okay, so I have my array, and let's say it has these 5 items. The first thing I'm going to do is to make the first one, 11.2, be the biggest. Now you might say, but it's not the biggest. Well, that's true, but we don't care. This is just the way the formula or the recipe works. You make the first one be the biggest. And so what I want to do next is to look at every other one. So I look at the 100, and I'm going to check if the 100 is bigger than what I have right now. If it is, I will simply get rid of that and then replace it with the 100, and then I'll move on to the 23. Is the 23 bigger than what I currently have, which is 100? And the answer would be no, and so I don't do anything, and I keep doing that, and I keep doing that. And so when I'm finished with the array, I will eventually end up with max containing the biggest number that we have found. All right. So again, the formula says we need to make the first item be the biggest. Okay, we set it to be max, and we don't care if in reality it's not the biggest. However, what I'm trying to get across is it's the only number that we care about, and that number will just be considered the biggest, if that makes sense. Okay, so since I have set the first number to be the biggest, then I don't need to set this to 0 anymore. All right, I don't want to look at this number again. I want to look at the number after it, which is at position 1. Okay, so understand why I put a 1 here. Good. So now I'm going to do the test. Okay, test if we have found a bigger, larger, number. Okay, so if the current item, all right, so name of the array I, if that is greater than what I currently have inside max, then it means we have found a number bigger. We have found a number larger. And so what do we want to do? Well, we just want to replace that. So I'm going to say max will now be that biggest number that I have found so far. So numbers I. Okay. All right, and that's it. Okay. My semicolon. Okay. So if we simulate this, right, the computer will say, all right, I is now 1. So we're looking at this one. And so it will check, is 100 greater than 11.2? Yes, it is. So I'm going to take that 100 and put it into max. So max now has 100. And then it will continue. I is now 2. So look at 23. Is 23 greater than 100? No. So we don't do anything. And we continue with 12. Once again, this will be false. And finally, this will also be false. All right. And at the end of it, when we finish the loop, we will have the biggest number encountered in the array being assigned to max. And so we can now easily print that value. Okay, so I could say cout the maximum, max for short, of the values entered is, and then I can obviously put max. Okay, and then a new line. And that's it. Again, we need to test this out. So I'm going to come here, recompile after I have saved, and then I'm going to execute. So I'm going to enter, let's say 12.34. Let's put a bigger one, 13.5, a bigger one, 15, a bigger one, 200, and let the last one be the biggest, 2000. So we expect that 2000 will be the result. Right? The maximum is 2000. So it works. Okay, so that's how you find the maximum. Let's move on to find the minimum. And again, to find the minimum, it is pretty much the same way. All right, so find the minimum, find the smallest value, okay, and we follow the same recipe. We call this min, and we set the first number to be the smallest. Okay, so the first number, item 0, position 0, will be set to the smallest. Excuse me. And then we will iterate over all the other numbers, and if those numbers are smaller than min, we'll just swap them, we'll replace them. All right, so it's pretty much the same thing. We don't have to really change much. Again, we're not going to make I be 0, we're going to make it be 1. All right, and then we will also do size. We will always increment, of course. And now I'm going to test. Right, so now if the current item is less than what I currently have as the smallest, then I am going to replace. Okay, And that's it. So let's test this out. Okay, so I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna come down here and I'm gonna change this to minimum. And this is min. Okay, so I'm gonna try again, recompile, and now I can execute. So I'm gonna put 12.34, 0.5, 100.25, 34, and negative 0.5. So we expect that the maximum will be 100.25 and the minimum will be negative 0.15. Okay, and that's what we get. So our program works. Okay, so again, this is just an algorithm, a recipe that you need to follow. The key takeaway is whenever you're trying to find the max or the min, you always set the first item to be the max, or in the case of min, to be the min. You always do that. And then whenever you iterate or loop through the items in the array, you start off from position 1. Okay, and it should be obvious to you by now why we start at position 1, right? It makes no sense to put 0 here because you're effectively asking the question, is numbers 0 greater than max? But since max is right now number 0, we know that that will always be false. Okay, so no need to be asking the same question again. We skip the first one and just go to the second one here. All right, so that's why we start at 1 and not 0. So think about that and see that it saves us from having to ask a question to do a comparison that we already know the answer to. All right, so that's the key thing here, right? This line 16 and line 26. And to actually solve the problem, we use a loop and then we do a comparison. In this case, greater than, and in this case, less than. So again, we're building up. We are taking what we have learned and sort of putting them together. So here, we know how to ask for inputs. We know how to create arrays. Here, I showed you how to specify the size using a variable. Okay. And so now we can put conditionals inside of loops. All right. So notice for each problem I want to solve, I create a separate loop. Right. So I loop to find the max, and then I come down here, and then I create another loop to find the min. All right. So I'll leave that there. And when we come back, we're going to look at one more algorithm when it comes to using a loop to find some value. In this next example, we want to find how many numbers in the array are even and how many are odd. Okay, so let me stop the video here, and when we pick back up, we're going to look at how to solve this one.